All right, here we go. Last bit of notes for Pythagorean theorem. There's all sorts of other ways we can apply Pythagorean theorem, but this is the last bit we're going to be tested on. And this is finding the missing leg. So now again, we're assuming we've been given a right triangle because they're going to tell us it's a right triangle. And from there, we're going to find a missing leg. We will be practicing this today in class. But here we go. A reminder. Here's a right triangle. We know it's a right triangle because it has a 90-degree angle. This is our leg, another leg, A and B. And then our hypotenuse is always C, and it's going to be the longest side. So given a right triangle, we are going to try and find the missing part. Now here's the deal. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. This equation is set up for us to use it for a missing hypotenuse. It's saying, or it's telling us that we'll find the hypotenuse given two legs. And that's fine, but we can actually use it backwards. And I'll show you how it's going to be done. Technically, we could work with this equation right here to find a missing leg just by subtracting one of our legs squared from this. If this is too out there for you, you don't have to really watch it too much other than just write it down. We know we could find A squared if we subtracted B squared from both sides. We'd end up with C squared minus B squared. A squared is that. Well, now if we want to find out what just A is, we take the square root of both sides. And we're left with A equals the square root of C squared plus B squared. This is actually something we're going to learn next year, and it's the distance formula. We're going to use this to find the distance because remember, we're all looking for distances here. This is how we're going to do it, but let's actually do some examples, and I think will be a little bit easier for us. So let's look at our first triangle. Let's call this, I made this look pretty square, but it's not supposed to be. Let's say a 6 here and a 10 here. And I don't know what this is. We're just going to call it A. It's our missing side, one of our missing sides, and it's a leg. So if we're going to apply this, let's call this, example, I'll spell it right this time. Example 1. If we're going to apply the Pythagorean theorem, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Let's go ahead and plug everything in that belongs in the right spot. So we don't have an A, so I'm going to leave that as A squared. We do have a B. It's 6. So B equals 6, C equals 10, and then A is our unknown. A squared plus 6 squared equals, in this case, 10 squared. Don't forget those squares. That's one of the common mistakes that happens. I'm going to use this orange pen to point out where everything's coming from. So this 6 came from here, and this 10 came from here. Okay, that's where we got them from. And then our A, we don't know it yet, so it's just right there. So let's rewrite this with doing the work. A squared plus 36 equals 100. If you didn't know that, you can always pull out your handy-dandy calculator, and that will help you. Or use your chart that you made for us. Again, if A squared is 36, I don't know why I was drawing that, we want to get A squared by itself. So we're going to do some algebra. To get A by itself, I'm going to move that 36 to the other side, and I'll do that by subtraction. Subtract 36. Let me carry down what's left over. I shouldn't have scratched that off, but that's okay. We have A squared. This goes bloop, that disappears completely. And we have 100 take away 36. 100 minus 36 is 64. So now we know that 64, A squared equals 64, and we're going to do that same thing we did before. If we have an A squared equaling a number, that means there's some number when I multiply it by itself, I get 64. You guys may already be thinking right now, square root both sides, we end up with A is 8. A is 8. I didn't use units on this, my apologies. It's not necessary for my example. So now we know that this is 8. So we have our triangle that is 6 and 8 and 10. Remember, our longest side is going to be our hypotenuse, and that's the case here. That worked out. In example 2, just like the last time we did an example, I'm going to give you some numbers that don't come out to nice answers. They don't come out to nice, simple numbers like 8, and that's okay. We don't need them to. We have a calculator for that. Example 2. Here is our right triangle, and I'm going to go ahead and call this 8, and I'll make this 15. I don't know what this side is. We're going to call it A. Now this is our missing leg again. So again, I'm using that equation, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This time, a is our unknown, b is 8. I can use units if I want, inches. And then c, or our hypotenuse this time, is 15 inches. So I'm going to set it all up in my equation. My a is unknown, so I'm going to leave that as a squared. My b value is 8 inches, so I'm going to call this 8 squared. And my c value is 15 inches, so I'm going to say 15 squared. Again, I can put the units in there, but I can always add them in again. A squared plus 8 times 8 is 64 equals 225. We're just going to do our simple algebra now to find out what that side is, that A is. Which means to get rid of that 64, I'm going to subtract 64 from both sides. I'm going to use my calculator. 225 minus 64 is, no, that's not right. 225 minus 64 is 161. So this is 161 equals A squared. This went away, right? That went bloop. So all I have to do is carry down this A squared equals 161. Again, we're left with that same thing. Something squared, something times itself is 161. So what is that thing? I don't know until I press that square root button, because this is not a nice, simple answer. The square root of both sides, I'm going to use my square root key, and I get 12.68857. So that's not the full answer, but remember we're rounding to our nearest tenth, so I'm going to say 12.7. I'm rounding up because the number next to 6 is 8, so I round up. 12.7. So my approximate answer, wiggly lines, we know that the square root of A squared is A, and the square root of 161 we decided was 12.7. And we're talking inches. There we go. So 12.7 inches was our answer. And let's see if this looks about right. 8 and 12.7, and then the hypotenuse is 15. Seems approximately correct to me. And on your test, I'm going to try and give you numbers that are pretty nice, but sometimes they're not going to be so nice. Today you're going to be practicing in a pixel art. I do want you to round your answer to the nearest tenth every time.